There we are. Good evening. This is Erica Miller with People from Cleveland Are Dope, and I have another interview, this time with dynamic dope duo of a couple, Dr. Pia Washington and Levett Washington. Thank you for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much. We're excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. As Pia already said, we are excited to be here with you.
Hey, I haven't seen you in person in way too long, so it's good to see you on screen at least. So, I'm going to introduce you guys to Levett and Pia. Dr. Pia Washington is a best-selling author, financial advisor, and realtor, also known as the Property PhD. She specializes in educating others about the value of accumulating property to generate wealth. With over 25 years of corporate experience, she currently serves as the Vice President of Financial Training and Investing at Anderson Business Advisors. Pia is also the President and Director of Path to Homeownership Dreams, which is a nonprofit organization which seeks to empower disadvantaged families on their journey to homeownership. Levett Washington is an accomplished human resources strategist and innovator in HR organizational alignment, technology transformation, and is currently a vice president of global HR for a technology company. He works alongside his wife, Pia, managing their nonprofit, and they co-authored their book entitled Shades of Love, Portraits of Successful Relationships. Together, this dope dynamic duo have raised 4 children, have 2 beautiful grandchildren, expecting a third, and are doing incredible work educating us about relationships and generating wealth. So again, welcome, Levett and Pia. I'm so happy to have you here. And whenever I speak to people from Cleveland, I always like to start off talking to you about growing up in Cleveland. So you can start by telling us what neighborhood you grew up in.
You want me to go first?
Certainly,
go first.
Ladies first, always.
So
I knew you would say that.
I was born, I believe when I was born, my parents lived in East Cleveland, right? So in the Shaw area, but I don't remember that very much. My early memories are from when we lived in Warrensville, and we lived on Walford, and I went to St. Henry's for elementary school through kind of that, like right around the middle school time frame. And then my mom remarried my dad, and then we moved to his home in University Heights. So then I transitioned from Catholic school to Wiley, and did the public school for 3 years in University Heights, Cleveland Heights. And then I decided myself that I wanted to go back to parochial school. So I ended up going to Beaumont School for Girls, and that's where I graduated from. But overall, I think growing up in Cleveland, I think it is a great place to be from. Cleveland was always a lot of fun. I felt like when we were growing up, especially in our time, like our age group, like, you know, it was a big city, but it felt small. Like, you know what I mean? Like you on the east side of town and like hanging out, going to the malls, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. I felt like it was a pretty nice place to grow up. I never had any, you know, any issues or anything like that. And I think the best part for me growing up and being from Cleveland is I actually met my husband there when we were in 8th grade at the age of 13. So that's one of the best things that came out of growing up in Cleveland.
Yay. Okay. We have that in common about
Right?
meeting your husbands growing up in Cleveland. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I grew up in the Lee Harvard area, more specifically 153rd. That is the area in which, from the time that I was born until later in life, that's the area that always felt home to me. I attended Grace Mount Elementary School, but my mother then moved us out to Warrensville Heights, where I spent 2 years there. And then she moved us out to Cleveland Heights. And so I am a Heights High graduate, Heights High Tiger. But Cleveland, 153rd, Lee Harvard was always home to me. That's where all my brothers were. That's where my family was. That's where all my friends were. But I had great friends that went to Shaker Heights, that went to Cleveland Heights, that went to Cleveland. I should say JFK. So that whole kind of Lee Road stretch, all the way from the East Cleveland all the way through to Miles, was sort of my domain and where I grew up. So, things like Hot Sauce Williams and, Shrimp Boat, those are all the things that were near and dear as I grew up in that area. So if anybody wants to check my Cleveland card, if you don't remember Shrimp Boat, then, I got nothing else to say to you. The best parts of growing up in Cleveland, I think my wife has already mentioned it. It was a small town, but at the same time, for us back then, it was big. It gave us a sense of neighborhood, a sense of community. And I think the thing that I've took forward with me throughout all of my life is that feeling of that backyard barbecue. No matter how I might have progressed in my career, no matter what city I might have lived in, I always remember that backyard barbecue. It was a time when family and friends came together and, we just threw something on the grill. We were out in the backyard. We were playing spades. We were laughing. We were being a community and family. So that's one of the things that I cherish most from my memory growing up in Cleveland, outside, of course, of meeting my wife.
So did you had to have played baseball at St. Henry's, right?
Believe it or not, I played baseball mostly at the what was now, well, at that point in time was Elliott. So we were part of the Cleveland municipal baseball group. I did play 1 year as a part of the St. Henry's organization, but yes, I absolutely thrived at playing and loved playing the game of baseball in the inner city of Cleveland.
Yeah, that's great. I never played sports, but that was our hangout when we were.
I was gonna say,
kids.
at first I thought she was talking to me. I said I played making up math problems. That's what I did for fun.
Was that your favorite subject in school, Pia?
Yes, math. And I think really early on, I knew I wanted to do something with money. I used to say I want to be a money person, and I didn't really know what that meant, like as I was like a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was around 16, 17 when the movie Wall Street came out, and I honed in on finance specifically, not accounting. I'm not a CPA, I don't like accounting, but like finance. So anything with the stock market, investing, and how to make money, and how businesses run, and how you invest in them was something that really intrigued me early on.
Wow, that's amazing. You don't hear too many people, especially women or girls, say that they are interested in that at such a young age. So that's very telling, given how your life has turned out.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely. I think too, having good organizations, like I was a part of En-ROADS. So Northeast Ohio chapter was the Cleveland and Akron arm of En-ROADS, which for people, your viewers that may not know, it's a internship organization for minorities and help them get involved in business and engineering careers. So being a first generation college student, I was accepted into En-ROADS coming out of my senior year of high school at Beaumont. And so every summer I worked for Eaton Corporation downtown. in the treasury and finance area. So that also kind of helped me solidify my decision to major in finance, so that every summer I had this internship. And then of course there were mentoring, there's mentoring programs, and there were weekend workshops, Dress for Success. And, just having all these people like kind of pouring into you and helping make sure that you're on the right path for your career. And that's actually where I ended up starting when I graduated. We graduated both of us from the University of Akron, and I ended up starting at Eaton as my first career right out of college. So,
wow, that is quite the story. It's great that you had the opportunity to be exposed to that type of a career so early. So that's great. Teenagers have a lot of choices when they're that age, and for you to choose to be involved in inroads and start your career path early is admirable.
thank you.
So you're welcome. You both went to the University of Akron.
Go Zips.
Yes, okay. And what did you major in?
I majored in finance, business finance.
Okay. What about
And
you?
I majored in human resources. I always knew that I wanted to be in human resources, so I majored in industrial relations, human resource management.
What made you want to be in human resources management?
It was one of those things where, as Pia mentioned, we're first generation college. So I personally didn't know a lot about careers that, college people would aspire to. But my mother worked at Ohio Bell. And I remember she had a brief stint working in HR, and she would talk a little bit about her experience in working with some of the people from HR. And while it wasn't the main part of her career, she, talked heavily about helping people. And then as a part of the program that I was going through in DECA at Cleveland Heights, they had an opportunity for an internship at the City of Cleveland Heights Human Resource Department. And so I took that opportunity to, get exposure to human resources. And it felt like it felt like a career that, while I didn't have to focus on finance, I didn't have to focus on making something, I didn't have to focus on, the overarching business. I could focus on the most important piece of the business, which is the people. And so from that, I just grew a love of helping people grow within their careers, helping people solve problems. And then as I got more involved in the aspects of, and back then it was called personnel management, but as I got involved in more of the aspects of human resource management, I really began to understand the importance of the human resource function within organizations, whether it's helping the organization grow, or whether helping the people grow, or solving problems for the people that are part of that organization. So from that, that's really kind of what has drove me over this last 25 years in human resources.
That's interesting. My mom was a human resources professional too. She worked for the federal government, and then I have my ex-brother-in-law was also in the same position as my mother. Is weird. But yeah, we have a lot of human resources professionals in our family. And now my youngest daughter has decided that is the career path that she wants to take.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
I think that's great. I think she'll be good at it.
And most people don't understand that there's so many aspects to HR. It's like when Pia talked earlier, it's like, oh, finance. Well, people automatically might think accounting. Well, human resources have so many other areas. There's learning and development. There is the talent acquisition. There is total rewards. There is, so many parts that people can specialize in and decide to grow a career in. So I've been happy to grow my career in that particular field.
What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the field since you started?
I think the biggest change that we've seen is that, as I mentioned earlier, we used to be known as personnel. And people often thought that the only thing that we were good at is the administration part of keeping records, paying people. But the biggest change has really been to allow people from HR to become a strategic partner at the business table, meaning that the organization has a strategic goal or direction it would like to go in. Well, guess what? You're not going to get there without the aid of the people within that organization. So allowing human resource professionals to have a seat at the strategic table to help them grow their business, not just from the administrative standpoint, but to really help the organization decide what does it take from a people perspective to get to that next step.
Mhm. Okay, so who were your biggest influences when you were growing up?
Would you like to go first again?
Sure, I'll go first. My biggest influences growing up, I think, well, obviously my mom. My mom was a single mom for my younger part of my life, and then marrying my dad, who was my stepdad, but I called him my dad. And I feel like they had a really big impact in me because they really just let me blossom and encouraged me that I could do whatever, I wanted to. I mean, when I didn't think I was smart, they were like, no, you're really smart. And so they were the first, I think, my first cheerleaders in terms of actually believing in me and letting me know that I can do whatever I want to do. And then when I said I want to go to this high school or I want to go to college, doing whatever they needed to do to see to it that I can make that happen. And then I think once I got into, college and into my career, I think having several different mentors from a business perspective, I think was really impactful for Levett and I because, college teaches you a lot of things. It might teach you how to do your job. It might teach you, the ins and out of things. But like take my major, for example, finance. Well, just because I had a degree in finance didn't mean that I knew how to handle finances. You know what I mean? So you come out of college and you have there's this academic knowledge, there's the encouragement from your family, and there's a mentoring. But then we also had to have personal mentors in our life. And Levett and I had some very early on business mentors who said, you know what, it's important that you don't accumulate a lot of debt. It's important that you invest your money. It's important to you. And so this aspect of kind of personal financial development and all of that's not taught in school. It's not taught when you get a finance degree. That's something that you have to learn. And a lot of other cultures, right, they have that information passed down from their moms and dads, from their families, from generations on, right? They have business savvy or, personal financial knowledge that they passed down. Well, we didn't have that in our families. So we needed mentors outside of work, outside of our family to also help us to know how to manage, as we started making a lot of money in these careers or making moves, buying houses, selling houses, and starting to make more money. We needed to know how to handle that money, if that makes sense. So we had quite a few, too many to even name, mentors that helped us personally to kind of get our financial situation together and just that personal development side.
Yeah.
What were some of the first things you decided to invest in?
Well, I think one of the best decisions that I made was buying the first house right out of college. So actually it was I think 3 months after graduation, we bought our first house in Cleveland Heights. And that ended up, and a lot of times there's a big debate right now whether buying a personal residence is a good investment or not, because you have debt on it and that whole thing. But I think when you use it and then you create equity and then you turn that equity into something else, I think it is a smart investment. So as a 22-year-old, buying that first property in Cleveland Heights, we paid $60 for it. And then 3 years later, we sold it for 90 something. So that allowed us to put a good down payment on the next investment, which was a new construction home in Sagamore Hills. So I think that was a pretty significant first investment as a young person. And then also during that same time, Levett and I had started an investment club. Actually with some of our friends and who wanted to learn about investing in stocks. And this was pre-internet, so we had to order like Morningstar. I ordered the Morningstar brochures, and you could get the pamphlets and the information, and we would research different companies and invest in companies. So obviously we also invested in our 401ks and things like that. But I think that that was a very unique and smart thing to also start doing at such a young age.
Levett, what about your biggest influences?
So I would answer that a little bit differently. The biggest influences for me was my community and network. I could easily say that, my grandmother was a big influence in the initial stages of my life, and that's who raised me. But just instilling me that you're born to be a proper child. You're born to be something different than which the community and the environment that which you're in. So that was the first influence. But then after that, it was the community that influenced me both, positively and negatively in the direction that I wanted to go. So all along the ways, I could see things, I could understand what was happening within our community. And there were people that would say, you might not want to do that. Or there was people that would say, hey, you know what, let's go do this. And because of that foundation that was instilled earlier, it was an opportunity for me to make a decision based on what I wanted to do. So the community network was that biggest influence on me. So when you say influence, I would say the network and community, both positive and negative. But along the way, have there been people who have been influential in guiding? Absolutely. There's probably too many people to name, but when they say it takes a village, it truly takes a village. My father was murdered when I was 10. And I had an amazing stepfather who filled in a lot of the gaps, but of course he can't fill in every single gap. I had an amazing grandfather who, was there from day one and was the biggest champion and was there through all of the sports and, celebrations in my life. But I also had my best friend's father, who was another father figure who filled in different parts of that. So there are many amazing mentors that I've had throughout my early career, my professional career. So I define that as my community, my network really had the biggest influence on me as I developed and grew. And then you asked the question about investment. While I agree with Pia in terms of the monetary investment, but I think that the biggest investment that we made was in each other, in our education, in our willingness to grow as a couple, as a team, and as individuals. So I think the biggest investment that we've made is in ourselves and willingness to learn what we didn't know and willing to be malleable and absorb things from others and not have an attitude that we knew everything.
That's an extraordinary answer. And I think it just goes to the foundation that you have as a family and what you've built together. So that's amazing. And I hope that anybody who is listening will take that to heart, because it really does matter who you have by your side as you journey through life. I totally agree with that. So again, that's a great advantage of having both of you here. So
Yes.
things seem like they were going along swimmingly for you in Cleveland, and then you left. What prompted you to move to California?
You could take this one.
So as much as I love Cleveland, I love saying that I am from Cleveland. I will always be a product of Cleveland. I love my Browns. I love my Indian. I love my Cavs. I just didn't want to be born and die in the same city. Throughout my career, I've had the fortunate pleasure of traveling all around the world and seeing many different cultures, seeing many different ways in which people were living. I always knew that I wanted to live outside of Cleveland for a period of time. Originally, I wanted to go to a university outside of the state of Ohio. But then as I, grew in my career, I said, you know what? I want to be able to live and raise my family in an environment that was different than Cleveland. So I told my wife, I said, at some point in time, we're going to move. And I'll never forget the first opportunity that we got to move from Cleveland. I got a promotion to take over the Southeast part of the United States for a technology company. And I was already down there. I was down there for 3 months, and we were house hunting. We had the house in Sagamore Hills up for sale. And my boss came back and said, "Hey, I just got a promotion. Are you willing to take over the Midwest?" And I told Pia that. I said, "Well, I don't know what to do." And she says, "What are you thinking about?" She ripped the sign out of the house, out of the yard, and said, "We're not moving." And so I said, "Okay, all right. The timing's not right." So, we had 2 sets of grandparents, great grandparents there in Cleveland that were helping to raise the kids. So I understood that. But then an opportunity presented itself later down the line by happenstance through our children, that we knew the timing was right. And so I'll let you take it from there, Pia.
Yeah, so I was not a fan of moving to the Southeast. It actually was the town Peachtree, Georgia, is where he was trying to get me to move outside of Atlanta. And I was like, absolutely not. And also, we have 4 little children. So at this point, I am not interested in leaving our community, right? Our family network, and having all of these amazing family members. And don't forget the aunts too, right? Aunts and uncles. Like, we had grandparents, great grands, and they would literally be like, "Can we get the kids this weekend? Can we get the kids this weekend?" So we had it. But then what happened was, our oldest son wanted to do acting, and there was an agency that was interested in representing them, and they basically told him that if he was ever in LA, or if he would could come to LA for pilot season, then there would be opportunity for him. So we made the decision to let him try it. And so pilot season is usually in the spring. So I made the sacrifice to take the other kids out of school, and I was homeschooling the 4 kids, and we packed up and we went to LA for pilot season. We actually sublet an apartment from one of our other Cleveland friends, that friend of ours that graduated from Shaker that was living in LA. And anyway, when I was here with the kids during pilot season and taking little Levett to auditions and all this stuff, I made the mistake of saying to my husband, "Oh, I could live here." Because, up at this point, I was very resistant to leave Cleveland and that family network. But I made the mistake of saying, "Oh, I could live here." And the next thing I know, I don't think I ever actually came back home. The next thing I know, he had put the house back on the market, was packing it up, getting everything in order. And then the next thing you know, I'm house hunting in California. So we moved from Cleveland to the LA suburbs, Oak Park area, in early 2000s.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, my story was more, we came to the West Coast around Christmas. We were in Vegas, and we rented a car. We drove to my uncle's house in Inglewood. It was 80 degrees. Next summer, we were going.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it just so happened at that time, I have had a great career in finance and doing a bunch of things, but there have been different opportunities where I had the opportunity to be at home with my kids. I've had nannies, and I've worked full time, and I've had opportunities to be home. And during this time, I was, like I said, I took time off. I was homeschooling them, and I was home with the kids. And we were lucky enough that Levett had gotten a job where he was traveling, and he just needed to be able to get to the airport. That's what he said. He said, "As long as I could get to an airport in under an hour, I'm fine with whatever you decide." So I literally picked, I mean, Erica, because you've been to our home and, watched us as we raised our kids, but everybody's like, "How do you go to Oak Park, like of all places in LA?" And I literally was like, my husband is saying he needs to be 45, no longer, no more than an hour from the airport. He also said to me, if I'm paying this is his exact quote, if I'm paying twice the price for half the house, I'm not paying for private school. So if you want the kids to have a good education, you better find the best school district you can find. And so that's literally what I did. Like, I just was like, okay, what school district has the best scores that's within an hour of LAX? And we landed in this really small community, big bedroom community, affluent community, whatever you want to call it, of Oak Park, which most people have never heard of. And when I say there were only 3 Black families, there was 3 Black families: the Washingtons, so us, my kids, the Woodses, and the Wilsons. And that was it in the whole
The fact
city.
that you can name the 3.
That's and all
And
3
you
W's.
are one of them.
Yes. And so yes, very and the other 2 are very Googleable. One of them was Flip Wilson's grandchildren, and the other one is Jordan Woods, which by now most people know who Jordan Woods is. So yes, those are the kids, the families that my kids grew up with. You have to be a certain age to know who Flip Wilson is, but it was his grandkids were the Wilsons. So yep, the Woods, the Washingtons, and the Wilsons.
Wow. So how did you feel living in California after living in Cleveland? Did it take a while before it felt like home?
I would say it was a little bit of culture shock, but I loved every minute of living in California, like every minute of living in California. And even given the dynamics of where we lived, we didn't have any issues. The schools were great. Some of our best friends we made, in there. So for me, yes, it was a little bit of a culture shock, but it was everything about it was good. Everything about it was positive. Everything about it felt like the right next step for us and our family. And it was hard, of course, at first. And we tried to keep up okay, we'll go back to Cleveland every Thanksgiving. And, then we would have, we'd send for our family and our parents to come to California to, visit us. And then his mom ended up moving out west to Phoenix. And, then his sister graduated from college, and then she moved to LA. So we were gradually kind of getting the family as much as we could kind of closer to where we were. But I would say the transition for me wasn't very hard. And I think it was one of the best moves that we made. I think it was a good move.
Was it hard for you?
So, for me and, for your African-American male listeners, hopefully they might be able to relate to this. As an African-American male, we often have to wear multiple faces as we go throughout our community, our daily lives, our work environments. And so I was used to having a work persona, a certain face persona that I presented in corporate America. When moving to Oak Park, it just became an extension of that work persona in my life persona. Okay. And so for many years, I walked around with a face that mimicked my corporate persona. So was it difficult? No, because it was just an extension of that corporate persona. Now, as we moved throughout the years, and I decided to expand the network of people that we would invite to our home and that would be a part of our smaller community outside of the community in which we lived in, but the community in which we called family, friends. I quickly realized that I didn't want to have that persona or that facade within my home. Mm-hmm. And so I quickly said, you know what? If I'm going to invite people into my home for an extended period of time, or invite them into my community of close circle family in California, then I need to be able to let down that facade or that persona. And so I think coming to that realization was probably the most difficult part for me, in that I needed to be true to myself. So if you're coming to my house and we're going to break bread, you know what? I might want to smoke a cigar. I might want to be able to talk about, experiences growing up in Cleveland. I might want to be able to talk about, the things that are important to me without having to be guarded with my words. Mm-hmm. So the initial transition, no, wasn't hard, because it was just another extension of that face or that facade. But later on, in recognizing what was important to me and what I needed within our community, and when I say community, I mean our circle of close-knit friends, it became important that I expressed that I needed that within my home.
Yeah, I think that's really good to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think another aspect of it that made it, I think, easier for me too, was because the lack of diversity in the school district and the neighborhood that we were in kind of forced me to continue to be involved, not only actively with my sorority, but also with Jack and Jill. So I was an active member of Jack and Jill, and that allowed my kids to also have other Black friends, because they weren't really, they had the other two families in Oak Park, but you know what I mean, to be around, other, African-American children. And then that allowed me also. So I think I had that earlier on. I had that, ability to just be myself because, I had sorority, I had Jack and Jill, and I had that kind of other village around me and around the kids that became a part of my everyday life. And it's really challenging. And our daughter in Georgia is going through it now. It's challenging, I think, as a Black family, raising kids, because you want them to be around kids that look like them, but you also want to have them in the best, safest, best academic and safe environment. And so we would go back and forth all the time. Like, is this the best thing for our kids? Like, are we doing the best thing? And so, they don't come with a manual. So we just do the best that we did the best that we could.
Yeah. I believe you've done a great job. So, no.
Thank you.
It's funny because, oftentimes as, parents, we want to give our children those same experiences that we had growing up. I mean, I love the fact that I grew up. I love the fact that I could walk up to Lee Harbor with my friends and hang out at, the dark side of the moon, or I could, go to, the host house, or all of those, things that just was the experiences of me growing up. You want that for your kids, but you also realize that it was by the grace of whoever you call your Lord and Savior. It was by the grace of whatever that got you through that. And so, do you really want to gamble with your children's future and putting them in that exact same environment and say, well, I survived it, so therefore you can? And I'll be the first one to tell you, I turned that completely over to my wife, because she understood the differences in the environments, and she knew that, taking that type of gamble and that type of risk, it wasn't worth it. No matter what the nostalgia, no matter how much you want to say you want to give them that experience. No. Okay. I often laughed and kid. I graduated, thank the Lordy. I survived Lee and Harvard by thank the Lordy. Okay. Because unfortunately, I have a lot of friends that didn't. Okay. So being able to put them in a different environment, to give them the best opportunity, absolutely. I'd make that sacrifice over and over again, 100% of the time.
Right. I'm right there with you. I feel the exact same way about raising our kids where we raised them. Santa Clarita is a beautiful community. There are more of us now than there were before, but still, and so our kids didn't grow up the way we grew up.
Right.
So, they had to move differently.
Yep, exactly. And that's what, ultimately, I think parents always say we want our next generation to be, to be a little bit better than, ours was, and have their experiences, be better, than ours were. And you want to obviously, make sure that they're safe and in the best, give them the best opportunity for success. And that's all we ever tried to do, in raising our kids. And also keeping our sanity and making sure that we kept our connection together. Because that's also part of it. Like, I think we talk about this a lot in our book, and just in general when talking about relationships, is I think one critical mistake people make is that you start having kids and then that becomes your life. Like collectively, your kids become your life. And then the worst case scenario is you wake up 18 years later, or if you have multiple kids, 20, 24 years later, and the last kid goes off to college and you look at your partner and you're like, well, who are you? Like, we didn't, that's how people grow apart. They pour so much into their children's lives and give so much of themselves and so much energy and time in raising them and focusing on them, that's important, but you also can't lose sight of your partner and who's going to be there when the kid, because right now our kids are all over the country. So we are the official empty nesters, right? And we still love you. I mean, we are in different rooms in the house, but we still enjoy being around each other and, having that, that bond between us as a couple, that our kids didn't define our relationships.
Yeah. Erica, I know you didn't talk about this, but I want to go back to one thing. Being from Cleveland is an amazing community, city. It has so many diverse parts. You got Little Italy. You have the amazing foods from, the West Side, the pierogies. You had, the art district. But unfortunately for us growing up, we never felt comfortable enough experiencing those things. It was an adult before I felt comfortable going to Little Italy to eat. Mm-hmm. It was as an adult when I really got to experience the near West Side's art district. Mm-hmm. So, while Cleveland is a wonderful place, it's great to be from, but during the time in which we grew up, those things weren't available or weren't known to us. So we might have not known how great Cleveland was while we were growing up. So we wanted to give our kids a different experience so they could experience those things that we didn't even realize were already within Cleveland, except for the snow part. But we wanted them to experience the arts. We wanted them to experience different cultures. We wanted them to, have a different flavor. And little did we know, Cleveland had all of that. But unfortunately, it just wasn't available to us, or we didn't feel comfortable, or we didn't feel safe and secure experiencing all those different parts of Cleveland in the, early 80s or late 70s, So, I think that also influenced us a little bit about, like I said, we love Cleveland, but we wanted to experience more outside of it.
Right. I wanted to expand my horizons, and so did my husband. And we wanted to make sure that our kids grew up not being small-minded, mm-hmm. but experiencing a lot more. And I think, living someplace else and being able to travel and being exposed to different cultures is a wonderful education onto itself. And I think that it's so valuable. And, we probably know people who will never leave.
They've never left.
Haven't
never
left.
Went on vacation. Yeah.
Don't even think about it. And,
yes.
We just wanted something more.
Absolutely.
But like Levett said, it'll always be home. It's a great place to be from. We have property there. We have investment property there. And now we have extended our nonprofit. So we, have that going on there as well. So, it'll always be our home. It'll always have a soft spot in our heart. We just don't go there when it's snowing.
I wanted to talk to you about your relationship coaching and what made you decide to want to write about relationships and teach others about relationships.
I think it was really prompted because people would ask us a lot of questions all the time about how do we stay together for so long, meeting in middle school, 8th grade, going through middle school, high school, college, and having a successful relationship and raising kids and all that. So we would get questions a lot. And so that was one thing. But I think I'm a person that likes to also always have like kind of a credential to back me up. So I was like, well, I don't want to just be talking about it. I want to learn about it. So we actually did go through the Relationship Coaching Institute to get like a coaching credential. But I thought it's easier to explain to somebody in a book form. So that was kind of just the impetus for that. And really what the book was like not just our experience, but the idea was to show other Black couples who had been together for at least 10 years or longer that were still in happy marriages, and highlight them, because during the time when we wrote that book, was it 2010? When it first came out, I feel like we still were not seeing a lot of positive Black images. The show Black Love came out after Shades of Love, after our book, like the different blogs and things that you see now on Instagram and all that stuff. Like, we didn't have that. So I thought, you know what, babe, this would be a great way for us to interview other couples and share their insight to, how they've made their relationship work, and also be able to highlight some beautiful Black couples along the way. And he has an interesting perspective. And I'll let you talk about the Steve Harvey book piece.
It's funny. Steve Harvey was actually my junior high basketball coach.
Another dope person from Cleveland.
Another dope person from Cleveland. And I remember Coach Harvey. I can't say what he used to say to me during the coaching moments of basketball in middle school, but needless to say, I have a great respect for him and, everything that he's done with his career professionally. But I found it odd that, people would pick up and be like, oh, well, Steve Harvey said this and Steve Harvey said that. And I remember thinking to myself, and I remember a quote that somebody once told me early on in my career: you don't take financial advice from a broke person. And yet and still, here we are. And again, this is no knock on Steve, so don't take it that way. But yet and still, we're taking marriage advice from people who have had countless failed relationships, or who had never been in a relationship. And, you hear these people on, Instagram and YouTube, and it's like, well, how many relationships have you been in over 5 years or 10 years? Well, I'm not married. But you're giving advice on how to be married, right? It's sort of like, are you going to take advice from somebody to how to raise your children that never had a child? Mm-hmm. And again, it's not a slight on the experience and education that people have, but at the same time, there's a realism that comes through experience. There's a realism that comes through working through the day-to-day life challenges. There's a realism that comes from, you know what, we're not going to quit on the same day. And don't get me wrong, my mother has been married 5 times. Okay.
Well, twice was the same person, so technically 4 husbands, but yeah.
Okay, there you go. So my grandparents were married for over 75 years. If I have an issue and challenge about how to save my marriage and work through an issue, am I going to talk to my mother, or am I going to talk to my grandparents?
Right.
I believe that you don't take, advice from a broke person. Mm-hmm. So for us, it was like when people would ask that question, it was like, well, what can we do to pass on, not only our experiences, but more importantly, other people's experiences from our community? Because trust me, we're not perfect. Okay. There's been many days when, I might have said, or she might have said, you know what, I'm done. We didn't do it on the same day, thank the Lordy, but there were other people that needed to share their experience, share their story, that somebody needed to hear. And that's the reason why we wanted to share that book, Shades of Love, Portraits of Successful Relationships, with the world. Because it's not about Pia and Vet. It's about how did all these other couples go through whatever they were going through and manage to survive and make it.
Are the couples in the book still married today?
That is the wonderful question. And in fact, we only lost one of the couples to a divorce.
Yes.
There's been 2 or 3 deaths, unfortunately, but out of all the other couples in the book, other than one, everybody else is still happily ever after.
Yes, yes.
Beating the odds.
Yes, exactly.
No, not beating the odds. It's changing the odds. Okay.
That's
Okay.
true. Yes,
All
yes.
right. I
'Cause it
like
is
that.
a decision. It's a decision. It's a decision
It
to, you
definitely
know,
is.
to love and to, work through. And I mean, change. I've had to change and want to change to be, a better spouse. And,
Mhm.
my husband is a guy that'll be like, tell me how I could be a better husband. Tell me what I could do to be a better dad. Like, he's just that person naturally. And not everybody has the insight, or the kind of emotional maturity to do that. And so that's something that, he's inspired me to try to be better or figure out, like, how I can be a better wife or a better person or a better mom. So
That's beautiful.
yeah.
Are you writing another book about relationships soon? Anything in the work?
We've been saying for 10 years, we have the title, and it's called Love is Never Enough. And it's the 5 pillars of successful relationships, because after we put together Shades of Love, there were themes that come through, right? And so we have this idea. We've just been so busy with other projects and our, like I said, our newest baby being the nonprofit, like it's just, we haven't done that yet. But I will say that we have that on the back burner as something that we still will, we have the framework for. We just need to take the time to do it.
And don't discount, you've put out 2 other books since that time too. So
I have, but they weren't relationships, Dave. They weren't. I did one on money and relationships called For the Love of Money, but that was like a co-written, co-authored book with some other financial professional women. And then, Attracting the Life You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom was my chapter of a book with Brian Tracy that basically talks about how we can control our destiny and attract our life, through, not law of manifestation, law of magnetism, prayer, whatever you call it. It's the same concept of having that faith and asking and believing for what you want and having the faith that is going to happen, and then leaving the rest up to God or the universe, whatever you believe. So yes, I have been busy doing other things, but we do want to do that next relationship book.
yes.
Well, we look forward to that. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful. Let's talk now about your nonprofit and what prompted you to start this venture.
I sound like a broken record when I continue to talk about how awesome my husband is, but he is very awesome. And I think very early on in our relationship, I realized how giving he was. And so we had, and I'll say, the opportunity and the blessing to be able to help families at different phases of our life. Good friend, college, fraternity brother, lost his job. They're living in California. It's very expensive. They were going to be displaced and homeless. My husband invited husband, wife, and daughters into our home. Our kids doubled up because they each had, all 4 of them had their own rooms. And, I say he, as the head of the household, don't come at me, ladies. He is the head of the household. I know I'm not a feminist.
It's okay. It's fine. You'll
He's
get
the
no
head of the
argument
household.
from me when you say that.
Yes.
Trust me.
So the decision was made to let them open up our home. And it was an easy one, but he's always been that person that felt like that's who we are. We're going to help our village. Another situation happened later where there was an abusive situation with a friend of ours, and she was a single mother at this point, running from an abusive ex with a young child. And it was like, we had to help her find a place to stay. And that has happened many, many times throughout our kids. Erica, you may have come to our house at one point in time and somebody might have been staying with us, because we've just always had that philosophy of, when people need help, you help them. And I will give him all the credit for initially, being that person. And sometimes our kids didn't like it. They had to give up their room or share their space, but it was a really good example of helping others. And so once I started, I was a client of Anderson Business Advisor, which is a business advisory law firm based out of Las Vegas. I was a client first from the investment side before I started working there in finance. But I also was a client because they create entities. And so we said, you know what, why don't we formalize this thing that we're already doing in helping families and really try to do it in a big way? And so that's how Path to Homeownership Dreams came to play, because we recognize that there are situations, whether it's a domestic abuse situation or just somebody with a job loss, where people have a hard time finding affordable housing solutions. And so it's about either giving them temporary housing solutions, providing some financial support, or education and resources. And so that's the genesis of how the nonprofit came to be.
Can you talk about some of the resources that you provide
Yeah,
with your
absolutely.
nonprofit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did in Las Vegas is we partnered with Safe Nest Las Vegas, which is a really amazing, also a nonprofit that caters to victims of domestic violence. And they have shelters, but they don't have enough shelters. They have a lot of different resources and things for, the women and the children that are displaced. So one of the things that we were able to do most recently was to, not only give donations. So we donated the funds from our nonprofit to their nonprofit to be able to assist in their efforts, but also collecting those things that they need to keep the shelter running on a day-to-day basis, which, are like clothes for the kids, blankets for the kids, personal items for the women, and clothing items, household items for when they transition out of the shelter, pots, pans, blankets. Like, there's so many things that are needed, and so one of the things that we do is we see ourselves as a strategic partner with organizations like Safe Nest. Another thing that I'm really passionate about is the education piece. So whether it's educating them on how to, manage their personal finances, because let's face it, a lot of times, we as women, we aren't the ones that are controlling the checkbook. And if you leave a situation or, go through a divorce, or you leave a domestic abuser, you may not know how to handle those personal finances. So being able to take my expertise and my knowledge and helping educate them on how to manage their finances and kind of giving them that education. And then lastly is actual housing. So our biggest drive in the next, year, 2 years is, I mentioned the property we have in Cleveland is a duplex. And, that is an opportunity to house people, but ultimately we'd like to open more houses and have more houses available in other states to where, that temporary housing solution would be available. So that's another one of our long-term goals. Levett, you have anything to add to that? I don't know if I forgot anything.
No, I think you were very articulate in summing that up in terms of, what the aims of the foundation is all about. It's about really, helping those people in need in the moment. And we are willing to partner with other organizations who have that same goal and mission in mind. So like you mentioned, being that strategic liaison between organizations and helping organizations come together to solve the needs within our community is really what it's all about.
What a wonderful organization. I wish you lots of continued success, and I hope that it will grow so that you can touch even more lives than you already are. That's wonderful. What a wonderful mission. Y'all are such good people.
Thank you.
We try.
Oh, okay. So what advice would you give to a young married couple about marriage?
I'm gonna start off on this one, babe. I would tell people who are young or just getting started in their marriage, and that is, your relationship is like a snowflake. It is unique to the both of you. No two relationships are going to be exactly alike. So what may work well for this couple over here may not work so well for you as a couple. Recognize and honor the differences and the uniqueness of your relationship. Take what you can from other parts. Be what I like to use the case methodology. Copy, steal everything, but make sure what you're copying and stealing works for you. Okay. The most important part of that relationship is the team that you have with the people that you are committed to. Right? It doesn't matter whether this works for Pia and Levett. It doesn't matter if this works for Paul and Erica. What works for you? Find out what works for you as a unit and then grow from there.
That's great advice.
Good. That's really good.
Anything to add, Pia?
I think just piggybacking off of something that I said earlier, which is really taking that time, because in order to do what he just said, you have to really connect. Because if you're not connecting with one another, how do you know what works for you? And so continuing to dialogue, continuing to, part of the reason why people say, oh, well, we just grew apart. Hopefully we're all going to be growing. But if you continue to have that open line of communication and talking about, what you're feeling or what changes that you might be going through or direction you might be thinking of going. And it's amazing what that honest and open communication will do. And one of the things, I'll give you a little bit of the foundation for the love is never enough. Like, two of the things, like we always talk about, I think people always say, oh, communication is the number one thing. But we really believe that if you don't have the foundation of trust first, like I have to trust him implicitly. Like I can say anything to him. I'm completely vulnerable. I know he won't judge me. And that's the only way I'm going to be able to communicate effectively and 100% honestly, right? Because I think that's what happens a lot of time. People say they expect you to communicate and they're like, we're supposed to communicate, but they haven't built that foundation of trust. So they still have that kind of, I call it the dating facade, right? Everybody's being nice in that early stage. You're in what we call limerence, that beginning stage of a relationship where everything's so rosy, you're falling in love, and then you're putting your best foot forward. And at some point in time, though, you have to let those barriers down. You have to let the guard down and like really be authentic to who you are and let your partner see your authentic self and build that trust. And then you can communicate. Then you can feel comfortable to really share everything that's on my heart. Every time I went through a situation where, I'm not feeling this particular career, or I want to be home with the kids, or I'm not happy about this, whatever the situation is, I never felt like Levett was going to judge me or criticize me for, sharing how I might be feeling, and vice versa, right? He, was always, willing and able to come to me with whatever it is that he's either wanting in the relationship or wanting, in his life to move forward. I mean, big thing was moving across country. I mean, we joke and kid about it. I didn't really want to go, but when it hit the fan and I was like, you know what, I could do California, we were moving to California. So, we work through those things and we don't always necessarily agree. But somebody does have to be the head of the household. Ultimately, I defer to him as the man, as the head of the house. And he always laughs when I say that, because I'm a strong personality and people don't necessarily automatically assume that with me. But, you can't have two heads. Somebody has to make the final decision. Somebody has to, make that final say, or have the final, word, if you will. So we try to compromise as much as we can, and he listens to my thoughts and my opinions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, somebody has to lead the family.
I don't know who said it, but it's very, very true. I make all the important decisions. She makes the rest. I just haven't had an important decision come up yet.
Oh, okay. You guys give great advice. Okay. How about some more advice?
Okay.
Let's hear what you would say to a college-age person who wants some wealth building advice. What would you say?
A college-age person that wants wealth building advice. I would I would say to that college age, I would say to college age Pia, if, like in hindsight, like don't take out the 14 credit cards that you're going to get offers for in the mail, because they know you're in college and they know you're going to be making, you know, a decent salary soon, you know, when you graduate. But I would honestly say to be mindful of the decisions that you're making early on, because I think that a lot of college students, they get the credit card offers, they start making a decent salary, more money than they've ever made, and then they automatically start buying stuff. Like, you know, we used to call it, you know, and then they get promoted, and then they get broke on another level, if you will, right? Because they're like, oh, now I'm making 6 figures. So now I need a Mercedes. Now I need a bigger house. Now I need to be carrying, you know, Louis bags and Gucci bags. And I think that for me, if I'm talking to a 22-year-old or, you know, recent young college student, I'm like, you know what? Wait for that stuff. You know, don't take out a lot of debt. Plan wisely. Like, you know, yes, you can have fun, you can buy things, you can buy nice things, but you also need to have an emergency fund. You also need to start investing at an early age because time is on your side. And then, you know, once you establish that nest egg and that kind of base, then you can go out there and buy all the, you know, the fancy things and things like that. But it's much nicer to have a Mercedes with no car payment or to be debt free, right? And to be able to go and pay cash for things than it is for people who, you know, I have a good friend of mine who had a beautiful $1 million home in Woodland Hills, California, and a great job. But she was like, I'm house poor. You know, I bought this big house. I make a lot of money, but I don't have a lot of discretionary income. So I think just kind of thinking about debt and income and using it wisely, I think would be the best advice that I could give. Levett, what do you think about that?
So I'm going to give a little bit of a different advice. And this is the advice that I gave my children. Go to college to invest in yourself. Go to college to learn what it is that you are passionate about. Go to college to further your education. You know, oftentimes, well, for us being first generation college, there was the pressure of know what you want to be when you graduate, right? Well, you know, does it make a whole lot of sense to invest a $100,000 undergraduate degree to come out making $40,000 a year? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to go to a college to invest in learning and educating yourself so that it can propel you for that next step of whatever you want to become or whatever it is that you want to do? There are a lot of great actors and actresses and producers and, you know, business people that spent maybe 1 year in college, no years in college, but they took the time to invest and learn in themselves or in their crafts that then propelled them to the next. So a young college age person, I won't say whether you're in college or out of college, but take that next journey to learn, what are you passionate about? What did that get you going? You know, the worst thing that a college age person could do is go to college, invest 4 years in learning something, then start the next 3 years in a career that you find that you hate, that you're miserable in. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that you're there is because you watched some TV show and thought that that's what I wanted to do.
Are you talking about our daughter?
No, I am not. I am not. But that's the advice that we give to our children.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when you take that next step and you begin that journey, that next stage of learning, you know, take that time to invest in yourself. Really figure out what you're passionate about. It's very rare that a child or a kid or a young adult goes to college and says, I want to major in finance, and that's what I want to be. I want to major in human resources, and that's what I'm going to spend the next 20 years of my career doing. That's the rarity. Mm-hmm. Take those times in those early years to really find out what you're passionate about. Because the one thing that I've learned throughout this life's journey, it's a journey. And you don't want to be on that journey 10 years down the road and go, I'm miserable.
Yeah. And the money will come, the wealth will come.
That's right.
If you do what you love and you really are passionate about what you're doing, the money will come, or wealth can be perceived in many different ways. It's not just, money in my bank account or my balance sheet, what my net worth is, right? If you are fulfilled in what you're doing, that is very important, and it is critical. And, he's right. One of our kids, brilliant, super smart, always was like, I'm going to be a doctor because that's what I'm expected to do because I'm smart. And this is what I've always said I wanted to do. But getting into college, and it was just like, well, I really enjoy political science. I really enjoy, these classes, and I'm falling asleep in my neuroscience classes, so it was like but understanding and giving that flexibility to say, do what you love. You're young, you're only young once, switch gears, do what you want to do. And now she's super passionate about, her job working for the Department of Justice. So that is very good advice for a young person as well, to do what you're passionate about.
Just to switch gears a little bit, what about somebody who's already in their 40s or maybe even 50s who hasn't gotten it together yet and, wants to start, but doesn't know how to turn things around?
What'd you say, babe?
Go ahead.
I would say first of all, it's never too late. It's never too late. I don't care how old you are. It's never too late. I think that what people don't talk about enough, though, it's a mindset. So when you're giving advice to a 20-something-year-old, Gen Z or whatever, they are going to be more, receptive to maybe making, instituting some practices early on. And when you're dealing with a 50-year-old, they're already set in their ways. So I think number one is a mindset shift. And you have to learn to think about, if you say they want to change, okay, that's the first step. Wanting to change and wanting to do something different is the first step. And having that, I call a money mindset, and understanding, how does money make you feel? Like, is money something that makes you feel secure? Is money something that gives you status? Is money something that allows you to give and help others? Right. So there's a bunch of different, what I call like money personalities, almost like love languages. And so understanding kind of what your deal is with money, because most of us have a deal that we grew up with, either from our parents or how we were raised. If you weren't raised with a lot and now you make a lot, you might have a scarcity mentality. And so you save. And so I think the first step is kind of getting a handle on, what's my relationship with money? What's my money mindset? And if I want to do better, meaning I want to grow my wealth, what do I need to do once I figure that out? So I figure out what my stuff is, and then I go on a path to, and there's a ton of, like, everybody's an expert. There's a ton of YouTubers and, TikTok, is another, one. I give a lot of advice on TikTok about personal finances, but I think getting your mindset right and then actually taking the steps to change your habits is what's key. And by that, I mean, if you're in debt and that's what's keeping you from, being financially independent, you got to stop using the credit cards and you got to pay down the debt. A lot of people come to me and say, well, teach me how to invest. Well, if you're paying 22% on credit cards, I can teach you how to invest and get 10% return, but you're still negative because you're paying out, 22%, on your credit cards and interest, right? So you need to handle that first. And then we can talk about making sure you have, your emergency fund. And then we can talk about investing in stocks and or real estate. And there's a process to doing that. So I think it's imperative for people to understand that it's not just one thing to flip the switch and say, oh, this is what it's going to do to help me generate wealth in my 40s or my 50s. It's a lot of different steps, and the willingness to make those changes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, from the human resources, it's interesting how she and I come at things, kind of differently, but really the same point. For me, I would describe it as, you have to know your why. Like Pia said, what's your relationship with money? I'm going to say, well, what's your why for making that change? Mm-hmm. Because there's been twice in my career when I have made dramatic shifts, if you will. And my why had nothing to do with money. And in fact, both of those situations, I gave up over, 30% of my income to chase or go after the why.
Mm.
So you have to understand your why. You have to understand what you're willing to sacrifice for that why. But more importantly, as Pia was trying to articulate, you also have to have a plan. Because just to say, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and just, kind of whimsical, that's not going to work. Understand your relationship with money, understand your why, develop your plan, and then go after it. Because guess what? As long as we're on this side of the dirt, you have an opportunity.
That's really good. And I'm gonna leave you with the gem that I don't usually share for free. No, I'm kidding. But you made me think about it when you talked about planning, and I usually teach the 5 P's of financial literacy. So, again, this could be applied to whatever age you are, but there are really 5 P's. And so, once you got the mindset, once you figure out your why and all that, the first P is plan. So figuring out what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get to a certain, income so that you can retire at a certain age? Are you trying to, have, just multiple streams of income so you don't have to work as hard? Are you trying to, retire early? Are you trying to save specifically for something like kids' college, education? So what's your plan? That's number one. The second P is always pay down. So I preach it all the time, but paying down debt. If you have a lot of debt, pay down that debt, get rid of that credit card debt. It really is a cancer that holds a lot of us back from being able to reach our financial goals. Number 3 is produce more. So once you pay down debt, if you can produce more. So now they talk about having a side hustle or, but the idea is that multiple streams of income is something that's going to help all of us reach financial independence a lot earlier. The average millionaire has at least 5 streams of income. It could be dividend income, it could be rental income, it could be, from owning their own business, but they have at least 5 sources of income. So produce more. Number 4 is the 4P is to protect. We don't talk about that a lot, but protecting what you have in terms of insurance and making sure that, if you do have businesses, your businesses are set up properly in entities, making sure that, we have a living trust. That's something people don't talk about. And from a legal background, you understand probably the very, important aspect of not just having life insurance for our family, but also having a living trust so that we don't end up, our estate doesn't end up in probate when we pass. And then and that brings me to the 5th P is when we pass down something to our heirs. There's a lot of talk about, I want to create generational wealth. I want to create generational wealth. But if you haven't put anything into place so that you can preserve and pass that down, protect that income and pass that down and have a mechanism to pass that down, then, maybe what you've done has been in vain. So those are my 5 P's of, financial literacy.
Thank you for sharing.
Well said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, those are the end. That's the end of those types of questions. I'm going to throw something random out to you just for fun. What's your favorite place in the world?
You want to go or you want me to go?
You can go. Ladies first, always.
Playa del Carmen, specifically the resort that we went to. What's the name of the resort? Oh my God.
Banyan Tree.
Banyan Tree Resort in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, right now. So right now, that's my favorite place in the world right now.
Okay.
My favorite place in the world right now is Resort Washington, my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
It is my true oasis, my sanctuary, as what Superman used to call his what do you call it?
Was it a lair or bat cave? I don't know.
Yeah, his well, the name is eluding me. I'm sure your viewers will recognize it, but it was his sanctuary, and that my backyard is my sanctuary. I can go out there, I can relax, and yes, the resorts are fine. Jamaica's wonderful. Would love to visit Fiji at some point in time. But for me, my backyard is the best place to be.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. You guys have so much to share, and I'm sure anybody who watches this will find so much value in the things that you've said here. So thank you again. Y'all are
Thank you
both
for
dope.
Our absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us. And I want a sweatshirt. I gotta get me a hoodie. I gotta get me a People from Cleveland Are Dope hoodie. They are so
Yes.
cute.
Merch.
Merch.
From ClevelandAreDope.com. You can
Okay.
find your merch.
Love it.
Well, thank you so
I'm
much,
happy to
Erica,
send
for
you
the invite.
happy to send you something just
Awesome.
because this has been so great. And I applaud you for what you're doing and everything that you're sharing. And it's been great talking to you about everything. And I'm glad we had a chance to catch up. And it's nice to have friends who are so dope.
Oh, thank you.
Likewise. The feeling is mutual. I'm so happy you have this platform to highlight, all the people from our wonderful city and the things that we have in common. So
yeah,
thank
that's
you
what it's
for
all
putting
about.
it together.
So it's all about. It's a great place to be from, and a lot of great people are from Cleveland. So I just want to keep sharing that because we get a bad rap sometimes.
Absolutely.
But we know better.
That's right.
Love it. Love it. Love
Pia
it.
said, I'm great that you have this platform which you can highlight, the wonderful people that come from Cleveland, the wonderful things that have come from Cleveland, but just again to reiterate how much of a wonderful city it is. So
Really is.
Kudos to you and your platform, and we wish you nothing but success in this endeavor. So thank you very much.
I appreciate you guys so much. Okay, take care. You can stay on for a second when we're done. Thanks.